welcome to
Red, White, and Bi.
I'm Ash.
And I'm Hannah, and we're coming at you with episode 23. Welcome back.
It was a crazy-ass week.
Oh, it has become the norm, right? I mean, this administration, this political climate, it's like, throw out the rules, anything can happen.
Which, we didn't plan to talk about this, Hannah, but one thing we should mention is that Rob Reiner Truth Social post that Trump just basically took it upon himself to say Rob Reiner was like a bad guy that he didn't like and he got murdered, and it was kind of gloaty, and it was one of the worst things I've ever seen him from a political figure.
Yeah, Ash and I, we talked about this when the tweet came out, that he was basically saying that Rob Reiner was so anti-Trump that he probably pissed people off and may have like caused his own murder, him and his wife's. But I was talking with Ash, like, can you imagine, I think the Reiners had 4 kids, right?
Or 3. I think
3 or 4. So imagine being one of them,
Yeah.
and you lose both of your elderly parents in this horrible, violent, unexpected way. Then on top of it, you find out that your brother is responsible. Your mentally ill or substance abusing, we're not sure, brother did this to your family. So you lose your parents, you lose your brother, and then the president of the United States is ridiculing the situation. I can't imagine what they're going through right now. That's so horrible and distasteful. I just can't believe it.
And it came out this morning that Nick, the son who is accused of the crime, was diagnosed a few weeks back with schizophrenia and was not responding well to his medication. It was making him violent.
That's really sad. And I'm not saying that I agree with this. Healthcare in America is a very complicated subject, so I'm not going to get into the nuances of it, right? But certainly people like the Reiners who are left-leaning, or at least the parents were, the subject of mental illness is a political one to that side of the aisle, and I understand that, you know, like, mental health care in the United States isn't as great as it could be. It's certainly not being handled by the government. Whether or not it should be is a different story. But to then have somebody that you feel like should be responsible for taking better care of the mentally ill, blaming the Reiners for their own deaths is just like a 5th, 6th, 100th layer of fucked up.
To Hannah's point, we had an administration using Pam Bondi, the head of the Justice Department, to go after people who were saying negative things about Charlie Kirk after his death, something that Charlie Kirk himself would have been against. And now somebody dies and you take it upon yourself to say something negative about them instead of...
And not just the administration, the Oval Office, the executive branch, the leader of the free world.
And it's like you could, A, not be a hypocrite, and B, just take the high road. But there's no high road in Trump.
Yeah, and again, we didn't plan to talk about this either, but there's no high road in Republicans anymore. Whether or not you agree with it, there used to be kind of like this feeling of like, you know, one party will take the low road and kind of like take you out at the knees and attack your family and like kind of play dirty and mudsling, and the other side wasn't doing as well because they weren't participating in that, and they were like trying to take a high road or whatever.
Is what you had.
That's gone. Like, both of them are just down in the mud now. Maybe they always were, but like, I definitely see it more than ever, personally.
It's like things that a lot of people hated about Mitt Romney were some of the things I respected. Like that he seemed like a genuinely kind person, and maybe it was his undoing that he couldn't tell you the story about helping a guy push a vehicle out of the mud on the side of the road when he was campaigning because he didn't want to toot his own horn.
Yeah, to quote the very highbrow and beloved Harry Potter series, as Dumbledore said, kindness is a virtue that people never fail to undervalue.
Amen. Love you, Mittens, Superman's dad. Kisses for Anne.
And Dumbledore.
So, obviously, we're going to have some news this week that's also like, I don't know how to say this other than a boner killer. Like, the Epstein files pretty much are going how Hannah and I had expected them to go.
Yeah, it's not a surprise, but it is, to use your verbiage, it is a boner killer. Yesterday was Epstein Day. We were, at our 30-day limit on the 19th. That was the legal legislative deadline for the FBI to release their files. And they did release files, and exactly like we said, heavily redacted, no new information. Ash, you were reading something that said something that was new to me earlier today, that I guess there is a legal burden to explain any redactions, and those weren't provided either.
Yeah, so there was a rep from California who had pointed out that each of the redactions must be justified in the law that was passed by Congress, and they have not yet received any justification for these redactions. Another thing she pointed out was that the Epstein files are supposed to be released in full, and there are definitely pages missing. Like entire parts are not just redacted, but left out, and that's a big deal.
It would be like, I don't know, like you're in school and the principal makes all these rules about homework and the way like grades are to be given and papers are to be graded, and the principal himself writes a paper and doesn't follow any of his own rules.
Yeah, it's kind of what we all expected, but I hope that Congress recognizes that they have some power here, and that if the administration or the DOJ or the FBI, you name it, are not complying with what is now law, they should go after them. Like, this is checks and balances. This is your congressional power. I think part of what has happened to this country is that we used to have 3 branches of government that hated each other, and it worked really well in our favor. However, now it got split to the Congress will work with the administration as long as they are on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're like too cooperative.
What it really should be is like, you could reach across the aisle and work with a Democrat and, write a bill together like this one. This is a bipartisan bill to go after the people who are hiding stuff. And it's like, okay, like, I hope this pisses you guys off enough that you remember who the real enemy is.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it in layers, right? The way that politics tries to pit regular, like, citizens against each other, when it shouldn't be citizen versus citizen. It should be citizen versus politician. And it shouldn't be, like, forget it. Forget my analogy. Sorry.
It's okay. Anyway, we don't know necessarily what's going to come out with all of this. I wouldn't get your hopes up, is all I will say. But last week, or 2 weeks ago, Hannah and I made you a promise on our last episode that we would talk about Canada and what's going on with euthanizing citizens over there. So we got some stats that we wanted to share with you.
Yeah, because this is a super interesting story, and the news has been full of stuff that we want to talk about. But like, this is still a big deal, and on a quiet news cycle week, like, this should have been top of subject lists. So we'll just go over it really briefly, because the stats came out for the 2024 program. It's referred to as MAID or MAID, medically assisted. I don't know what it stands for.
Medically assisted incompetent deaths, something like that. No, I'm just making it up.
Medical assistance in dying. It's even dumber than we thought. So we'll just call it MAID, I guess.
You got made. Like Tommy was supposed to get made, but instead he got whacked. Oh.
By the government.
Yeah.
So the MAID statistics for 2024 are out. And Ash, drum roll, please.
So obviously statistics, this is the year 2025. It's almost come to an end, but they release statistics from 2023 to 2024 because they have the full data. Over 15,000 people were euthanized by the Canadian government in 2023.
In fact, the exact number we were kind of laughing about is 16,499. they just couldn't convince that last quadruped to, they just, they just couldn't convince that last quadriplegic to go into the program, so they couldn't round out their numbers to a nice 16.5.
Yeah, the Olympian didn't want to do it. Oh, how dare she. So that's 5.1% of all deaths in the year 2024, and I would say that unless we're talking about murderers, the government shouldn't be killing anybody. You know, if I'm fully in support of people with terminal illnesses deciding how they go out, but I don't want government involved in our healthcare, and I certainly don't want them to have the power to say, this big mouth Ash, she talks a lot. I think we should say she's terminally ill and like take her out.
Well, and I think that's the real issue. If you guys are unfamiliar with this is the issue we're seeing like on conversations on social media and on the internet and stuff. The idea that people in this program are calling and contacting patients that they think are eligible and may be interested in a MAID death. So people are getting, like, if they have a cancer diagnosis, they're getting contacted by somebody like, do you want to participate in this? Famously, the joke we were referencing earlier, there was a quadriplegic Special Olympian who had made like a beautiful life for herself and accomplished all this stuff. And she was contacted based on being a quadriplegic. There was an anecdotal story that I saw online where somebody's relative was contacted when she got a terminal illness diagnosis. And the person on the phone was saying things like, wouldn't you like to decrease the burden to your family?
Ugh.
It's disgusting. So it's not, for me, I don't know how you separate social health care from like government assisted suicide. If all your healthcare comes from the government anyway, to me, like whether or not I like it, it makes sense that the government's also doing this. The bigger problem is that it's like they're recruiting for it. And it's like, what is the incentive here?
Because I got to be honest, you know, I have talked a lot about how when I was a kid, I was a tomboy. And I think if I had grown up now, if I had grown up with parents who were far left, I might have ended up like a trans kid because they misread what was going on with me. At the same time, I think if this had been happening and I lived in Canada in my college years or when I was in high school, they'd have been calling me up and say, hey, we have decided to expand this to the mentally ill, non-terminal. Your Tumblr posts are really depressing. Would you like to get...
Well, and it sounds like a wild hypothetical, but this is the actual conversation in Canada. So there is a well-defined, planned expansion that is set to roll out in 2027 that includes a, quote, non-terminal track to MAID. So you don't, by 2027, I'm pretty sure this is like a set decision, you will be eligible for this even if you aren't terminally diagnosed on basis of mental illness. And this part, as far as I understand, this second part that I'm about to say isn't as concrete. It's still being discussed, but I think that there is a fervent discussion about including minors who are, quote, mentally competent or mentally advanced above the age of 16. So you're talking about 16 and 17-year-olds who are going to be eligible for this program too in a non-terminal way. Now, to your point, Ash, if somebody had offered me assisted suicide from the government at 16, I don't think I was not depressed enough to have made a good decision for myself. I don't think anybody, listen, there's a lot of things that 16-year-olds should not be in charge of.
Yeah.
And I definitely think this is one of them. To me, again, we had just said that, like, they're recruiting people, and it seems like there's an incentive for them to want to get people on this MAID program. And as I'm talking about it a minute ago, I'm realizing, like, well, of course there is. This is a government-funded healthcare society. It's extremely expensive to die, like in terms of like healthcare economics for private or whatever. Like most of the money that is spent on a person's healthcare in their lifetime is surrounding their dying. So it's probably a lot cheaper for a socialized medicine structure to control the death and to cut it off before it becomes expensive. There's a clear monetary incentive to killing people.
And again, tinfoil hatting here, but if you have government-run healthcare that you realize you cannot afford, who would you want out of the mix? You want older people, maybe people who are living off of the government because they have mental illness or they're too sad to work or too anxious or whatever the case may be. You want kids who are too young to be in the workforce gone. And it's like this teenager, this depressed teenager doesn't even work at McDonald's and it eats too much. Let's get rid of him.
Yeah. Yeah, you're basically taking out the big price tag people, the people who are going to have expensive cancer-related deaths, and people who are going to be living off the system, to your point, like on and off medication, in and out of institutions, not necessarily working and contributing to the socialized structure. You're picking on expensive, vulnerable people.
And what they're probably thinking about with the Paralympian is to say, listen, right now your family loves you and they take care of you, or you take care of yourself because you're an Olympian and you know what the hell you're doing. But what if you ever get to a point where the state has to take care of you? They can't tell her, we don't want you to be a burden to the state. So they try to guilt her into it and make it about her family. And then it's when you look at communism, everything was involuntary, everything was forced, and they have mass graves to prove that they just forced it all. And it's like, what if we could just make all of these deaths look like they're on the up and up? What if we can kill people and minimize the population and try to get it back to thriving without changing any of our terrible, not working policies, but put it all on the people that we deem undesirable?
Speaking of undesirable, you open it up for the mentally ill. That's a perfectly, on paper, good excuse to start killing homeless people and indigent, transient people. And
really, how is this different from anything that the Nazis did? How is this different from what Mao did or Pol Pot? They try to create the illusion of choice. Mm-hmm. But in reality, if this goes far enough, they could take somebody like me who they don't like the kind of speech that is being used in Canada because they don't have free speech there, and they could deem me mentally ill and kill me.
Well, and I could see it in a perhaps like less sinister, well, not less sinister, in a less dramatic way. If you get one of these phone calls and they're trying to convince you to get on the MAID program and you decline, I could see that as a reason to be like, okay, you declined the government approved treatment for your illness. Now you're on your own. Now you're not on government healthcare because you rejected the healthcare track of treatment for your illness or whatever it may be.
Yeah, like I have no idea how far this could go, but it was funny when I looked it up, and they give you the AI generated pop-up on Google. One of it said, like, there's a slippery slope mentality about it. And it's like, it seems pretty fair to say that this one might be a slippery slope.
I think slippery slope logical fallacy is kind of like a conspiracy theory fallacy. Like, yes, a lot of times it is a logical issue. Not everything that you argue slippery slope for is going to be true. It could be sensationalized. But sometimes it is, and slippery slope is a real thing.
Yeah.
You just can't attribute it to everything you might want to, but, like, this seems pretty fucking clear.
You let Hannah and Ash get married, next thing you know, somebody's going to be marrying a duck. That's something I've heard in my life.
Yeah, I've heard, marrying your hamster or something like that, marry your car.
So to wrap up this story, of all the things we will not allow on Red, White, and Bi, we don't want the government being allowed to kill us. It's not so much to ask.
It's really not. I feel like it's the basics. We totally support, and Ash, you too, right? We totally support people being able to make their own decisions about the end of their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why does it have to be daddy government?
Always. My question is, why do we have to involve the government? They just make everything messier. It's not good.
Speaking of the government making everything messier, Ash, we noticed this a few weeks ago, and I think we had meant to talk about it, and it just sort of got lost in the shuffle, as things do. Have you noticed the blue check government social media sites? They're unhinged. Like, I've been seeing the weirdest, like, stuff, and I'll go and look and see who the poster is, and it turns out to be, like, a blue check, like, Department of Defense, or the White House itself, or Homeland Security, CDC, whatever. But I don't know why the sudden shift to, like, a shocking social media game has seemed to be a priority, but the latest installment example that I want to give is there was a video that they posted, and it was like a video of ICE agents arresting what I assume was like an illegal immigrant that they were going to deport, and they're putting him in an ICE van. But they put a filter over it of like snow falling, like it was a cute like little Christmas clip, and it said there's no place like home for the holidays. Self-deport today with our like Homeland Security app. I listener, believe me when I say this, my mouth fell open and all I could do was turn my phone to show Ash, and like I had no words.
Well, and here's the thing. It seems as if people who like Trump and want to give him the benefit of the doubt are willing to say that some of this stuff is unhinged. And they'll say, I think it's Stephen Miller, or I think it's, so-and-so in the administration. It's like, no, look at that Rob Reiner Truth Social post. The whole administration is unhinged. And who's the leader? So the Epstein files, they're going to blame Kim Bondi for like, she had him, she didn't have him. They're going to blame anybody they can. But it's like, at the top of this, you have a president who maybe never had his marbles or lost them, but this is not a normal administration. We can admit that, yes?
I think we can admit it. And even if all these like unhinged posts that we're seeing are someone else's idea, there are no consequences for it. And, like, I think it's being encouraged. You're seeing stuff from all branches of the government, and no one's upset about it. And to your point, you have the president doing his own unhinged stuff on like Truth Social and all that. I think you posted the other day, it was like a commentary meme on what we've been seeing, and it was another Franklin post, and it was Franklin takes away Trump's social media or whatever. I think someone should at this point. I get that like the internet is powerful, whatever, it's 2025, you have to like speak the language of the people. This is not what I want the government to be.
Again, tinfoil hattie, but I believe that Trump and MAGA are designed to destroy what's left of conservatism, because who does this kind of a post actually appeal to? We're not going to reach people who would actually self-deport, because if home was the best place to be for the holidays, they would be there. Mm-hmm. We are not appealing to people who have empathy for immigrants but believe in the letter of the law. They might think, like Hannah, this is kind of cringe.
Yeah, I feel like it makes light of a very serious and complicated issue.
And who are you appealing to? People like Nick Fuentes? Is that what you want the Republican Party to look like? Because to me, that's what that kind of a post does.
Well, I feel like they know who their audience is, like in terms of MAGA or whatever. It is, people who listen to the show know that we're, just because we don't like the left, we also hate MAGA. We also hate like this like weird offshoot of what people are pretending conservatism is today. But we know what MAGA is, and they're like loud and emotional and kind of racist and ignorant. And it's glad handing. It's like, that's the people who got you elected, so you're pandering to them. Like, look what a good job we're doing. Like, we're making fun of people who are being deported and rounded up.
It's populist leftism. And I'm sorry, but people who are collectivist, people who love someone like Candace Owens because they don't realize how collectivist they are. That, it's like, I can pretend that I don't hate black women if I go to a stupid black woman for all of my information, It's just like, they're utter hypocrites, and that's, to me, what I've always accused the left of, and that's where MAGA belongs. So to me, this kind of a post, unless you're trying to be unhelpful, you're going nuts. Like at best we can say they're acting crazy, and at worst we can say they're intentionally hurting any GOP type brand.
Well, and it's funny you say brand, because as you're talking, I'm thinking like, you know, like a shocking or like edgy humor style social media has worked for companies. You know, like Wendy's had like an unhinged social media for a minute there. I think Colgate was being kind of crazy. This was something we saw like maybe 5-10 years ago starting to happen, where companies were putting like young, edgy people in charge of their posts, and it was working and it was being talked about and it was pretty cool. So of course the government is about 10 years too late. But also, like, is this an appropriate approach for a government? I don't want the same things from a government as I want from, like, big commercial giants. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't toothpaste or fast food. This is our country. And I don't want sarcasm and edgy humor and, you know, some Gen Alpha running social media posts.
Yeah, and the idea that I think people have been trained to choose for decades, for a long time now, between two bad things and accept whatever they think is the least bad as okay. Like, that's what we're doing with parties. But now it's like, I saw all this stuff going into the election with Biden, where Biden became the president, and then the subsequent one against Harris. And it was like, do you want a good economy, or are you that upset about mean tweets? Like, that was the question. And my thought, as somebody who's never voted for Trump in a primary, it's like, what if we could have a good economy and no mean tweets? What if we could just choose someone entirely different?
What about competence and decorum? Is that an option?
Exactly.
And again, we were just talking about this within the last 24 hours. This isn't a new idea, but we're seeing it, at least to my point of view, more often than ever. Each election, it seems like it gets worse, where like a pretty terrible candidate is being put up, and the other party, rather than like saying like, oh, I can beat you handily with like middle of the road or a great candidate, they like meet the level of incompetence.
Yeah.
Like, incumbent Trump should have been easy to beat with a decent candidate, and he was beaten. But it was by Joe Biden, like, who probably couldn't have beaten anyone else. Yeah. And then again, you have Biden and Trump against each other, and it's like, are we scraping the bottom of the barrel here? All you had to do was put up someone halfway decent, and it would have been a landslide.
And I think there may be a reason for this. Like,
I should say, I'm sorry, I totally even forgot. It was Kamala Trump. It was like, it's even more laughable. I forgot she was the fucking candidate. Oh.
She's like, if you do your best,
you can
then
be drunk like
you
me.
did the best you could do.
Margot, get your face out of there.
Hey.
So we're going to take a little bit more serious of a turn here and kind of segue, in keeping with the theme of a slow response time by law enforcement to something really tragic happening. We've got to talk about one of the bigger stories this week on the first night of Hanukkah in Australia on Bondi Beach. Ash, you want to tell us more about what happened?
Sure. 15 people were injured I'll start over. 15 people were killed and 40 people were injured when a father and son team of Islamists decided to open fire on people having a menorah lighting ceremony on Bondi Beach. The victims ranged from 10 to 87. There were people who said that the older people were targeted first because they couldn't run.
Well, and it should be noted, too, that there were Holocaust survivors in that crowd. And, of course, the youngest, a 10-year-old little girl who was there to celebrate Hanukkah. I watched an interview from one of the eyewitnesses who was there, and he was expressing, his anger over the situation and how senseless and tragic it was. And he kept saying, Hanukkah is for kids. Like, this was like a family. It was more than just a lighting ceremony. It was like a party for children, a family event for like grandparents and little kids to hang out, celebrate the first night of Hanukkah. Like, it was a festival.
And some of these victims were people who survived the Holocaust and wanted to basically retire and enjoy their golden years on a beautiful beach, someplace lovely, and their lives were cut short by the same kind of hate that caused them to be imprisoned during the Holocaust. And I think it's a really dark reality that I've seen statistics that the rate of increase in anti-Semitism presently is greater than it was shortly before the Holocaust. Fortunately, we should mention that a Muslim man who is the son of Syrian refugees, Ahmed al-Ahmed, decided to intervene when the police were hiding behind cop cars. He just, unarmed, challenged a shooter, took away his gun, and protected Jews. And that man is not only an Australian hero, but he's a hero to all the Syrians who are standing up to their own persecution, and he's a hero to people like me.
And that is the beautiful silver lining of this story, that, a Muslim stood up for people who were being targeted because they were Jews. But it should be noted, of all the horrible themes that this story brings up, that guy acted because, to Ash's point, it was something like 20 minutes that the police were there and didn't know how to handle the situation. So this story covers a lot of topics, including gun control. Australia was always the country that people who were in favor of gun control would bring up to say, Australia has really strict gun laws and they haven't had a mass shooting in 30 years. Well, guess what? They still had one. And on top of that, you have law enforcement that has no idea how to handle it. So perhaps it does lessen public mass shootings, but they're wildly unprepared for it when it inevitably does. There are lots of conspiracies about why it took him so long to react and why it was up to this hero to do something because the police didn't. But I think the easiest and perhaps most likely explanation is that they just have no fucking clue what to do when inevitably somebody gets a hold of a gun and decides to do something like this.
I watched an interview with a young mother who was on Bondi Beach, and she and her husband were separated from their baby, and they were hiding behind a cop car and just trying to get to their baby daughter, and the mother tried to grab for the gun of a female officer who was not reacting, and a male officer held her down and said, "You'll get shot." And she was willing to take a risk that they were trained to take, but were unwilling to take.
And let me say something that I feel like Australia has been probably pretty active in trying to quiet down. The hero who stopped the shooting was himself shot, but not by the fucking perpetrator. He was shot by the fucking law enforcement. So when they finally did decide to act on the heels of someone being brave without a weapon, they shoot the guy. He's in the hospital because law enforcement shot him.
Yeah, and I'll find you guys the name, but there's an actor and influencer in Australia who's very pro-Jewish, anti-Jewish hate, who himself points out that people are very sensitive to Islamophobia to the extent that they will kind of let people engage in protests that are violent and they just push every barrier you can imagine because they're too afraid to be labeled Islamophobes in Australia. They don't seem to care, however, nearly as much if they're labeled anti-Semites. And I think part of that could be post 9/11, I feel like people, they didn't want to paint Muslims with a broad brush, and I don't blame them. Even this story shows you that you can't say that all Muslims are bad. We have a hero that protected Jews that day. However, it was why are people not afraid to paint Jews with such a broad brush or be labeled anti-Semites? Is it this kind of woke idea that Jews are somehow privileged, or is it that they're not deemed a threat?
Well, and I think the way we're seeing that too is they're attacking the very word anti-Semite. They're saying that the word doesn't mean what the people who are saying it think it means. Sure. That you can't call me anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist, as if they were different. And they're just taking the power of the word away altogether. Like they're making it a crying wolf situation or trying to, when I really don't think it is.
Well, and here's the thing. If you want to get into semantics, fine. You're not an anti-Semite. You're a Jew-hating, racist, sick fuck, and I hate you back. But here's the real issue, is we've seen people this past week stop saying Zio, where they want to call you like a Zionist Nazi, or stop saying Zionist, and now they're just switching to Jew. And it was like, if we say anti-Zionist and we put our toe in the water and we get away with it, even though 97% of Jews are Zionists, oh, I got away with it. Now I can just say what I really mean. And I'm glad they're saying what they really mean, but it's like, people need to realize that this is not nearly as fringe as it was 20 years ago. It's building.
To your point, I've seen a lot of response to this Bondi Beach shooting that I really agree with. Like there was one in particular, and I'm just going to paraphrase it, but it's like, you can't be like excusing crowds who are screaming globalize the Intifada. You can't be okay with people, saying anti-Israel things and spray painting like public demonstrations and wearing keffiyehs, and then act surprised when someone mows down families and Holocaust survivors on Hanukkah. Like, you can be that person, you can support that stuff, but you don't get to act outraged when you feel like it about Jews getting slaughtered. You're either pro or con, and you should be honest with yourself and honest with people around you about where the fuck you stand.
Yeah, when I see people like Mamdani or Ilhan Omar posting like Happy Hanukkah or like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened, it's like, the fuck you are. You've been pushing for this kind of nasty rhetoric, this anti-Jewish rhetoric. You've been pushing blood libels and, pretending that you don't know the real definition of a genocide for 2 years plus. So don't act like you care now that something terrible happened. You're probably gleeful about it. You're just not going to say that.
I feel like, yeah, if you're okay with the protests, you're okay with the 2 Israeli emissaries getting shot down in D.C., you're okay with the Jews being lit on fire in Colorado, you're okay with knockout deaths in New York, you're okay with the Bebas boys being strangled by Hamas.
And nobody said a word. And when I have, mostly Christian friends, and only a handful of them are pointing any of this out, and so few people, no matter their background, aren't going to talk about real genocides like the one in Nigeria, I'm like feeling like I'm living in the Twilight Zone.
And I'm going to say something as somebody who was raised extremist Christian, extreme fundamentalist. I obviously have walked away from that lifestyle, but like, I know my Bible and I know Christianity. And if you're a Christian who hates Jews, you're not a Christian. If you're a Christian who thinks that this is okay, your God would put you in hell. I'm not a Christian, but Christianity is built on Judaism. There is no Christ. There is no Christianity. There is no heaven. There is no Jerusalem. There is no Jesus without Jews. You need to think long and hard about where your beliefs come from.
The end.
Yeah, we can definitely lighten it up, but I just want to say, like, pay attention.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't affect you. It's easy to pretend it's not happening. I've talked to a couple people who have no idea that it's dangerous to be a Jew right now. And who have no idea what's going on at all in the world. And that's I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ash. That's a tack I've taken on a lot of stories in my life, and I'm not going to say I'm above that. If it doesn't affect you, A, it's easy to do. B, it's comforting to do, and C, it can just sometimes happen without you even meaning it to. It doesn't make you a bad person. But if you haven't been told to pay attention yet, I'm going to tell you right now, I think it's your responsibility as a decent person to start paying attention to what's happening to Jewish people, because you need to. And what happens to Jews happens to all of us.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going on. I think part of it is what Hannah points out all the time. Sometimes it's not necessarily us avoiding things, but our news sources avoiding reporting on things. Because I can't speak for what people on the left see, but it's like, if you saw that there was a home in California shot up in a drive-by shooting because of a Hanukkah display on their lawn, and you knew about Bondi Beach and you knew about Colorado, would you start to see a trend and worry about people you know who are Jewish or people you don't know who are Jewish? I worry about Muslims enslaved by the Chinese government, and I'm not a Muslim. And it's like...
Yeah, no one's talking about Uyghurs anymore, and I don't understand that either. Like, if you're going to care about marginalized, downtrodden people, open your fucking eyes. It's not who you think it is. It's not who people are shouting at you about.
Yeah.
It's the quiet ones who don't have advocates.
And that's why I think a lot of the problems that are happening between people and between groups could be solved by individualism. Like, I know that there are people who are oppressed by the Chinese government who are Ahmed al-Ahmeds, who are good people, who don't need to be treated terribly by an oppressive force. And I would hope that I would advocate for anybody, any individual who is being oppressed. And it's a scary place to be when you realize that if I were that oppressed person, there's a handful of people in my life who would stand up for me. Mm-hmm. So this show is about freedom. It's about thinking critically. And I would just say, think critically about everything. Try to find as many sources of information as you can. And hey, it's the holiday season. Be a good person, goodwill toward your fellow man, and just try to stand up for people who need it.
Definitely. I'll add to that something that I've talked about before and that I always try to do. If you have a subject you feel strongly on, if you hear a story that makes you, emotionally motivated one way or the other, purposely seek out the opposite opinion. If you feel strongly that Islamophobia is a problem in this country, purposely seek out something that talks about the opposite. If you feel like anything, like just take any example, purposely read what the opposers are saying. And then that will either double down what you originally thought, which is a good thing, or it'll make you question what you originally thought, which is a good thing. So use your brain, stop being afraid to look at it from the other side. The worst that can happen is that you'll have a more informed opinion.
So for a lighter poll question, was your favorite Christmas song composed before or after 1970?
And some context for this. We met somebody who was saying that they're bummed out that they don't remake, like pop stars don't remake Christmas songs anymore, which A, I don't think is true, and B, is like a horrifying opinion. We had also within 24 hours of this conversation, before it happened, Ash and I said to each other, all the good Christmas songs have already been made. Stop making fucking Christmas songs. Their Jonas Brothers were on my Christmas shuffle. And I was just like, what is this shit?
No, I don't want you guys writing Christmas songs anymore. I like Christmas songs, but like all the old bangers. Come all ye faithful, Adeste Fideles. Just
Hark the Herald Angels, Silent Night, like whatever.
We're good.
So obviously, you know our opinion on it. But like talking to this other person who felt the opposite was a real eye opener. Like, oh my gosh, like maybe we're in the minority. I don't know.
I legit asked her, are you talking about Hey Santa? And she was like, yeah. And I needed to crawl out of my skin. But maybe you love Hey Santa, so we're going to ask you this question.
Hey Santa.
Hey Santa.
So, yeah, let us know what you think. Do you enjoy the new Christmas music? No shade if you do. We're genuinely curious. Or do you prefer to stick to some of the old hymns? 1960s, what's your jam? Let us know.
Bye.
Bye.